it seems like there's sort of two layers of planning. The first layer is trying to qualify. And we talked a lot about that. And I love that, your phrase, repositioning your assets in order to qualify sooner. But then the second layer of planning sort of comes on the back end here, where, my understanding is if you go into a nursing home and you get coverage from Medicaid and then you pass away, they're going to use a tool known as estate recovery to seize a certain portion of your assets. Now, first of all, how does that work? How does that work in Idaho? Are they taking, is it like probate assets only, or probate and non-probate assets? Sort of, what are the rules there?
In Idaho, I will just say Idaho is pretty aggressive in their estate recovery process, and so in Idaho they will go after any assets that are in the probate estate, and then they've expanded that definition to include other assets that, in a way that pass outside of the estate. For instance, like an IRA has a beneficiary designation, but they actually pull those back in for purposes of recovery and say, nope, we're going to come after that. Anything else that passes upon death through joint tenancy, beneficiary designation. The only exception that I mentioned earlier is life insurance, because there's a specific rule that accepts that if it's paid to a named beneficiary. And so that's really, they're going to pull in just about, and in the rule it has this and other arrangements, which Idaho Medicaid interprets that as broadly as they possibly can to bring in almost anything that they can go after. And Idaho also has a statute that allows the state, and this is really to recover it, and even the way they interpret it sometimes a little different, but it allows the state to set aside transfers. So if someone gifted something within the look-back period, which is that 5-year period, although there's been some litigation where they've tried to expand that beyond, and sometimes the facts weren't good in the case, but essentially they can file an action and set aside that gift and essentially pull that back in.
Wow.
It's not something they do a lot, but it is out there. And so it's always kind of this dagger, this a sword out there that you never know might cut you down if you're not careful. So,
right.
So they are pretty aggressive on that.
So it doesn't, is there anything, it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot you can do then from an estate recovery planning perspective, aside from the life insurance, which you mentioned, or obviously if you're thinking far enough in advance, you could start transferring assets before this look-back period, before the 5-year look-back period. But other than that, are you pretty much just at the mercy of this estate recovery process?
You are. And I've always looked at it really, if you really want to avoid estate recovery, about the only way is to give away assets more than 5 years before you need it. And, a lot of the clients, that's not even realistic because they need those assets to live on.
Right.
But there is a couple of, and one thing that I think gets missed often is, and it surprises me how often there's a disabled child. If there's a disabled child, then estate recovery actually can't recover until that disabled child has also passed away. And so sometimes doing some things for the benefit of that disabled child, which there's also some transfer, there's two different sides of that. That's one of those transfer exceptions, is to give assets to that disabled child or to a trust for the disabled child, but it can also extend that estate recovery for a longer period. And most of the time what happens in that is that, and really they'll potentially recover when that disabled child passes away, but at least there's something that can be to benefit that child potentially for a period of time too. And a lot of times estate recovery kind of is gone from that point, and they're really just looking at it as far as that disabled child. Do they get Medicaid that they're subject to estate recovery or not? So,
right.
So that's really about the only other possibility that might come up. So.